So the meaning of this particular word, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, is that with the aid and with the assistance and with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I begin reciting this particular Quran. Now in this particular word, there are three important words here. One is ar-Rahman and the other one is Rahim. Rahman in Arabic is known as a mubalagha, meaning the English translation is the most merciful. These two are qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ar-Rahman and he is also Rahim as well. But ar-Rahman is such a quality which is exclusive for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be the most merciful. We can show some kind of compassion to our little children or our students, but the most merciful only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be. So the word ar-Rahman here, the most merciful, is a quality, is an attribute specific and exclusive for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then after that there is the word ar-Rahim, which means kind. And this word ar-Rahim has a shared meaning. It can be used for the creator and it can also be used for the created as well. It can be used for the humans and it can also be used for the creator, i.e. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when we use it in conjunction with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most kind. But if we just use it for a normal human being, we will say kind. Because obviously we can be kind as well. We could be kind to our students, we can be kind to our children, we can be kind to our next door neighbor, to fellow Muslim brothers and sisters. So ar-Rahim has a shared meaning, is a quality which can be used for Allah and it can be used for humans as well. Whereas ar-Rahman is only exclusively for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be the most merciful. Now from this particular word, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, we'll be looking at very important mas'ala today, and that will take most of our time, is regarding naming a child ar-Rahman or Rahim. That you've got a child, so can you call him ar-Rahman, or can you call him Rahim, and so on. Now before we look at that mas'ala, or that particular question in hand, first of all I'll give you a brief overview of what guidelines or what things should you consider, what kind of name should you consider before you decide to give a name for a child. It comes in a hadith of Sunan al-Tirmidhi, where the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that a child is pledged to its akikah, which will be sacrificed on the 7th day. Then after that, the child will be given a name and his hair will be shaved off. From this particular hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that a child, when he's born, he's pledged to his akikah, meaning that all the calamities, all the distress, all the pain which was going to befall that particular child is uplifted when you do akikah. Now on behalf of a small boy, you sacrifice 2 goats or 2 sheep, or on behalf of a girl, you sacrifice a sheep or a goat. When you do the akikah, then all the calamities, all the things which are going to befall that child is uplifted. Then, and this will be done on the 7th day. Then after that, you should name the child, and then after that, you should shave the hair of the child. And in other traditions and in other books of fiqh and jurisprudence, it says that the hair should be weighed and sadaqah and money should be given equivalent to the hair. Now from this particular hadith, we understand that on the 7th day, the child should be named. And some scholars of the view that as soon as the child is born, you should give a name for the child. Now the base ruling when it comes to naming a child, choosing a name for a child, is that it should have a good meaning. The name should be such which is good and it gives a good meaning. Because keeping a bad name for a child has a bad effect on the child. And keeping a good name for a child has a good effect on the child. Now how can that be? If a child has a good name, he feels more confident in himself. He's not worried about going to school. He's not worried about people teasing him. He's not worried about people mocking him or ridiculing his name. But if a child is given a funny name, if a child is given a name which doesn't make sense, which is funny, then that person, that child, he doesn't feel like going to school. Because when he goes to school, he's always feeling that he's going to get bullied. People are going to tease him. They're going to say that, oh, look at your name, you've got a funny name and so on. And start mocking him and ridiculing him. And even if you was to go to school, then obviously there's that nagging thought in his mind that, people are going to make fun of me because of the name I have. So good name has a good effect on the child. A bad name, a name which doesn't make sense at all, has a bad effect on the child. And this is deduced from a hadith of Sunan Abu Dawud, where the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, on the day of judgment, every single one of you will be called with your name and your father's name. For example, your name was Zayd and your father's name was Ahmad, so you will be called Zayd ibn Ahmad, come here. So, on the day of judgment, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that you will be called with your name and the name of your father. Therefore, it's also part of the hadith, therefore give a good name to your child. From Hazrat Adam alayhi salam all the way until day of judgment, the billions of people who have set foot on this earth, they will be in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will question them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask them regarding their deeds and actions. And in front of everyone, you will be called with your name. You will be called so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, come here. In front of billions of people. So therefore Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that give a good name to a child, because on the day of judgment he will be called with that name and the name of his father. Now what are the guidelines which we should keep in mind when we decide to give a name for a child? Now I'm going to mention a list. This list is not like in order, meaning that you've got a choice of whichever names you want to choose. The first type of name, or the first category of names which you should call for your child, or which you should name for your child, are the names of the prophets, are the names of the Anbiya. Ibrahim, Ismail, Ishaq, Idris, Yahya, Muhammad. Names of the prophets, Adam, all the way from Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, the names which are mentioned in the Quran, names which are mentioned in Hadith, names which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to the prophets, or which the prophets had. These names should be chosen for your child. So that is the first category, or the first type of name which you should choose for your child, and that is names of prophets like Ibrahim, like Ismail, like Ishaq, like Idris, like Ilyas, and so on and so forth. The second category of names is to use the word Abd. Abd, Arabic word which means slave. To use the word Abd and then to refer it to one of the 99 names of Allah, or to refer it to one of the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As all of you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 99 names. Ar-Rahman is one of his names. Ar-Rahim is one of his names. Razzaq, Salah, and so on and so forth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 99 names. So what you do is that you use the word Abd, which means slave, and you refer it, or you link it to one of the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you call him Abdul Rahman, you call it Abdul Rahim, Abdul Razzaq, Abdul Quddus, Abdul Salam, and so on and so forth. So that is the second category of name which you should call for your child, or should use for your child, when the word Abd is referred to one of the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third category of name which you should use or call or name for your child is the names of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or are the names of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has 99 names. Some scholars like Ibn Tafseer rahmatullah alayh say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has 300 names, whereas Imam Abu Bakr ibn Arabi rahmatullah alayh says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had more than 1,000 names. Imam Abu Bakr ibn Arabi rahmatullah alayh says Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had 1,000 names. So the names which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had, that should be used when naming your child. Now what are the names of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Is mentioned in a hadith of Tirmidhi, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that I have many names. I have many names. Ana Muhammad, I am Muhammad, I am the praiser. Wa ana Ahmad, and I am the most deserving of the praise. Wa ana Mahi, I am the eraser. Wa ana Hashim, I am the gatherer. Wa ana Aqib, and I am the concluder. Meaning that after me there will be no topic. So in this particular hadith, 5 names of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was mentioned, i.e. Muhammad, Ahmad, Mahi, Hashim, Afif. So these kind of names you can choose for your child. You have a child, if you don't want to use the names of one of the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, or you don't want to use the word Abd linking to one of the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then use one of the names of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like Muhammad, or Ahmad, or Mahi, or Hashim, or Aqib, and so on and so forth. After that, the next category is the names of the Sahaba, the companions, ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in, like Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, Sa'id bin Zayd, and so on and so forth. Names which the companions, the blessed companions, the noble companions had, give such names to your child. So the conclusion is that there are 4 categories or 4 types of names which you should call or which you should use for your child. One is names of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Number 2, when the word Abd is referring or linked to one of the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like Abdul Razzaq, Abdul Qadir, and so on. Number 3, one of the names of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And number 4, the names of the Sahaba ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in. Now I mentioned 4 types of names. Well, we need to look at some of the miscellaneous rulings regarding these names which I mentioned. The first ruling is that, as I mentioned, that category number 2 are those names where the word Abd is linked to one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now from this we can understand that enslavement or Abd is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can only be the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can only be the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can't be slaves for anyone else, even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So therefore, for you to use the word Abd with any other name besides the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that would be forbidden and that would not be allowed. So for example, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's name, so you can't say Abdul Muhammad, or Ahmad, which is the name of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you can't say Abdul Ahmad. You could only use the word Abd, enslavement, for the names and the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The 99 which I mentioned, Razzaq and so on, Kareem and Rahim and Rahman and so on, you can only use those names, the word Abd in conjunction with one of the names and qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't say Abdul Rasul, say for example, the slave of the Prophet, or Abid Rasul or something like that, again, the worshipper of the Prophet. These names are not allowed. Why? Because you're using the word Abd and enslavement for someone besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or whether, just say there's a boy, his name is Ibrahim, so you had a child and you call him Abdul Ibrahim, again that would not be allowed. Or Abdul Zayd or Abdul Yusuf and so on. These names, why? Because they are these names are not the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are not the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore for you to use the word Abd for any other names besides the names and qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not be allowed and will not be permitted. However, if we remember right at the beginning of today's lesson, we looked at the word Rahim. And I said that Rahim is such a word which has a shared meaning, which can be used for both the creator and created. So therefore, to give a child a name just Rahim, not Abdul Rahim, just Rahim, then that would be permissible. Or Kareem, because again, that is such a word which can be used for the creator and the created. So for a child just to give him the name of Rahim and Kareem and so on and so forth, that would be allowed. However, if it's under the scale of Rahman, like in Arabic it's called Mubalagha scale, then that cannot be used for a person. You can't just call a person Rahman. Like, let's say a child is born, you can't call him Rahman. You have to use the word Abdul Rahman. Okay? And similarly, it's preferable to use the word Abdul Rahim. However, if you just call him Rahim, that would also be sufficient. Why? Because the word Rahim is such a verb, it's such a sega, it's such a word which has a shared meaning, which can be used for both the creator and the created. The next nukta we're going to look at is regarding the name Yasin. The reason why we're going to touch on this word Yasin is because there's difference of opinion. The word Yasin, according to Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh, is actually a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The word Yasin is a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the same way Ar-Rahman is a name and quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you can't call a child Ar-Rahman by itself. Or the same way Quddus is a quality and attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you cannot call a child Quddus just by itself. So similarly, Yasin is a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala according to Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi. So therefore, just to call a child Yasin or Yasin Ahmed or Yasin Ali or something like that, that will not be allowed and that will not be permitted. However, according to the other schools of thought, in particular Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, Imam Ahmed and Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, they have said that Yasin is not a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but in fact it is a name of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the same way as I mentioned before, you can keep names of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you can keep names such as Ahmad and Muhammad and Hashir and Aqib and so on and so forth. Similarly, you can also keep the name Yasin for a child. So there are differences of opinions. Obviously, it is preferable to refrain from it, but if you do keep a child named Yasin, then it will be permissible and it will be allowed. The next mas'ala we're going to look at is regarding names of angels. So whether an angel's name or names of an angel can be used to name a child. For example, like Jibreel. So whether you can call a child Jibreel, or Mikael, whether you can call a child Mikael, and so on and so forth. Again, there's difference of opinion amongst the ulamas, amongst the scholars, but generally speaking, according to the Hanafi school of thought, it is permissible to keep a child's name with the name of an angel. It's permissible to keep a child's name with the name of angel. So for example, Jibreel, you can call a child Jibreel, or Mikael and so on, you can call that. That is something which is permissible, and that is something which is allowed. The next mas'ala we're going to look at is regarding non-Muslim names. Whether you can keep a non-Muslim name for a child. For example, like John or Jim or something like that, whether you can call them for a child. Now, if, for example, if we had imagined, or if we assume, or if it was an Islamic state, say for example, then to keep names, like just say English name, which doesn't have a bad meaning, or nor does it have a good meaning, would have been permissible. To call a child Jim, say for example, or Bob, that would have been permissible. But in this country, or nowadays, that would not be allowed. The reason why is that non-Muslim name has become a source of identification for the non-Muslim. Like for example, just say you've got a list in front of you, and there's like a name called Jim there, so you think automatically what? That this person is non-Muslim. Even though he may be like, he may have like a Muslim kind of features, you could say he may be dark and so on, but when you look at it like his name is Jim, so you think to yourself, well, whether he's Muslim or not. Because these non-Muslim names have become something which is known as Shi'ar al-Kuffar. It has become a source or a sign of identification for the disbelievers. So therefore, to keep non-Muslim names, even though it may be something which has a nice meaning, like a rose or Rosie, even though that may have a nice meaning and so on, that will not be allowed and that will not be permissible. Why? Because nowadays these non-Muslim names has become a source of identification, has become the Shi'ar al-Kuffar, that this is something which you can use to determine whether a person is a Muslim or not. The same way, like if you see a person who's got a cross around his neck, so automatically you think, oh, this person is a Christian. Or if you see a person walking and he's got one of the black skull caps and so on, so you think, oh, this person is a Jew. So similarly, with the names as well. If you're going to give your child a Jewish name or a Christian name or even non-Muslim name, people will start thinking or assuming that this person is a non-Muslim. So because of that reason, the mas'ala of the ruling is that non-Muslim name, even though it may have a nice meaning, as I said, even though it may not have a bad meaning, it may not have even a good meaning, but it could be a good meaning like something like Rosie or something like that. But because it has become a shi'ar or a sign of the disbelievers, so therefore such names will not be allowed and such names will not be permissible. Another mas'ala on regarding names is regarding nicknames. Now whether you can call or say nickname for or not nickname, like shorten a name for the child. For example, let's say somebody's name is Usman, so can you call him Us come here, Us come here, and so on. Now the mas'ala is that if by shortening the name, if you do not intend to ridicule or mock that person, then that would be allowed. I'll give you some examples later. Imam Bukhari rahmatullah alayh, in his Al-Adab al-Mufrad, Imam Bukhari rahmatullah has written other hadith books as well. The famous one is Sahih al-Bukhari. He's also written another hadith book called Al-Adab al-Mufrad. So in Al-Adab al-Mufrad, there are some hadiths which shows that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam called his wife, his beloved wife Aisha, shortened the name and called her Ash, Ya Ash. And similarly for Uthman radiallahu anhu, his son-in-law, there are some hadiths where it's narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam called him Usmu. So the alif and noon which is at the end, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam deleted it and shortened it and he said Usmu. Now from this we can understand that if you are shortening a person's name and you're not doing it to mock that person or something like that, then that would be allowed. So for example, like Yusuf, if you just say Yusuf or something like that, then that would be allowed, that would be permissible. For Ibrahim, and you just say Ibi or something like that, as long as you're not mocking that person or ridiculing that person, or there isn't some kind of implied hint or an implied gesture or indication that you are mocking that person, then that would be allowed and that would be permissible. However, another name, like Fatima, now if you were to shorten Fatima, just say if you were to shorten M.A., what would you say? Fati or Fati or something like that. So if you are saying it for that reason to mock that particular girl, then that would not be allowed. Okay, so basically names where you're shortening it, and after shortening it, it gives a really not pleasant meaning, then obviously that would not be allowed. But obviously if you shorten it and it doesn't give a bad meaning or anything like that, and you're doing it for a as I said, not to mock or ridicule that person, then it will be allowed and it will be permissible. Another ruling here regarding nicknames and so on, or to call another person. The ruling is that to give a person a title, and the title you are giving to that person is used as a source of identification. That you're using that particular title so that everybody knows that, okay, this is such and such a person, then to use that name will be permissible and will be allowed. So I'll give you an example. There are many hadiths in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam called some Sahaba, or called a companion, Al-A'raj. A'raj means the crippled one. So if you are calling a person, just say a person who's crippled, and you're calling, oh, crippled one, come here, and you're saying it not to mock him, not to ridicule him, but you're using it as a source of identification, then that will be permissible. For example, just say you and brother here is talking, so you're saying, oh, you know, Zayd and so on, then he's asking, oh, who's this Zayd? So you're telling, oh, you know, that crippled one. So as long as you're not saying it in a bad way, or you're not saying it to, you know, put him low or to mock him or to ridicule him, you're just saying, oh, Zayd, because he is crippled, and you're using that word, Al-A'raj, as a source of identification, and that would be allowed and that would be permissible. There's also hadiths where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam called a particular Sahaba Zul Yadayn, or Zul Yadayn. Zul Yadayn means big hand. So again, if a person uses those terminologies, Zul Yadayn and so on, not to mock that person, not to ridicule that person, but as a source of identification, then that would be allowed and that would be permissible. Like sometimes you may say that, oh, who's you know, Zayd or so on, and who is this, or the dark one and so on. So as long as the word dark or something, you're not using it as a source or a way of ridiculing or mocking that person, then that would be allowed. But if you are using it to mock or ridicule that person, and that would not be allowed. And that is what is mentioned in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَنَابَزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ, that do not call each other with bad titles. The bad titles, बुरे लक़ब से मत पुकारो, meaning that do not call each other with bad titles. So from this we can understand that as long as it's not done with the intention to mock or ridicule someone, then it will be permissible. But obviously if you are doing it with the intention to mock and to ridicule a person, to make fun out of that person, then that would be something which is not allowed and something which will not be permissible. The final mas'ala before we finish this particular section, and that is that whether, for example, a person who's memorized the Quran, or he's done a degree, 6 years alimi degree, or a person has become mufti and so on. So whether, or just say a normal like title or normal degree you've done, like just for example in law or in something like maths or whatever, and then you've done a PhD there, and then you're known as a doctor. Now the ruling is that whether these titles can be added at the beginning of your name. Like for example, your name may be Ibrahim, but you become a Hafiz. So can you change your name in the passport and instead of calling Ibrahim, just put on the word Hafiz and say Hafiz Ibrahim, and that is like your name now. In the passport, official name is Hafiz Ibrahim. Or you become a Maulana and you say Maulana Ibrahim. Or you become a Mufti and then you use the word Mufti Ibrahim and so on. Now the masla regarding adding titles, and as I said, this could be for like doctor and so on. The masla is really regarding adding titles at the beginning or end of the name. If this is done without the intention of pride, then it will be permissible. If not, or otherwise, it would not be permissible. Meaning that you're adding the word Hafiz or Maulana at the beginning, not to like, how to say, there's no pride there. You're not doing it to show off. You're not doing it to show that you are more knowledgeable, more clever than the other person. You don't want to, those kind of intention. You're not using it for those kind of intention. Then it will be permissible for you to add the word or the title Hafiz, Maulana, Mufti, and so on. Yeah, it's a condition that you are Hafiz. Okay, not like you're not Hafiz and then just put you on, and that would be like deceiving. So that's not allowed. But as long as you are Hafiz and Maulana and Mufti and so on, and you are and you're doing it without the intention of pride, then it will be permissible to add these kind of titles at the beginning of your name. Similarly, at the end of your name to put any kind of degrees or anything which you've done, then again, without the intention of pride and so on, it will be permissible. But if a person is doing it so that he can show up and he can boast and he can tell people that I am a Hafiz and I am a Maulana and Mufti and so on and so forth, and he's doing it for that intention, then obviously that would be something which should not be allowed and which should not be permissible. If you are curious, by the way, I don't have Maulana or Mufti written in the beginning of my name. Okay, let's carry on. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now, this is the first sentence in which the word of Allah has been mentioned. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, that the word Allah is mentioned in this particular word, in this particular sentence. Now, I'll take this opportunity, very briefly, not in too much detail, that whether, or very briefly we'll mention some beliefs and some aqidah which we should have regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we know who's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know who He is, but what kind of beliefs we as Muslims should have regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what kind of beliefs as Muslims which we should not possess and which we should not have regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the first belief and the most important belief is that we should believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. We should believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-wahid, He is one. And that everything in this world came into being or came into existence through His doing. Meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was there from before, and because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the world was created. The skies were created, the earth was created, the planets which were created, the sun, the moon. Because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the earth orbits around the sun, and so on and so forth. So that is our belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. He was there from before, and because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all this world came into being, came into existence because of the doing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, those people who do not believe that this world came into existence through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's doing are known as atheists. And this is something which is not new. This is not something which started around 100 years ago, 200 years ago. The atheists, or those people who deny the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who deny the occurrence of Day of Judgment and the signs of Day of Judgment and so on, and being brought back to life, this started many, many hundreds and thousands of years ago, during Nuh alayhi salam time. Because from Nuh alayhi salam, that was the very first time when kufr and disbelief started. Before, during Hazrat Adam alayhi salam's time and so on, there wasn't any kufr, there wasn't any disbelief. But from Nuh alayhi salam's time, that's when all the kufr and the disbelief started. And as all of you know, because of their disobedience towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of their disobedience to the Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a flood which destroyed all of them. So the very first kufr and the very first, you could say, atheism started from Nuh alayhi salam. Now there are many stories which you can hear and which you have heard regarding, regarding atheists and what do they say and what kind of answers which we should give. And inshallah, these verses, there are many verses in the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala many times he will, in particular, surahs which are being revealed or which are known as Makki, which were revealed before Hijrah. Many verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show his power, will show his qudrat, and he will say to his atheists and he will say to those people who deny the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, and he will give examples to those people who deny the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'll just very briefly mention a story regarding a group of atheists and Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah. A very famous story where a group of atheists, they came to Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah to have a debate, to discuss some issues and debate with Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah asked them that what do you say or what do you think about a person who claims that he saw a ship or he saw a boat navigating by itself, that he saw a ship or a boat, flowing without a sailor, without a captain. He saw a ship or a boat loading its goods from the ship to the dock and goods which are on the dock loading it by itself. So those group of atheists replied that person will be considered mad. If a person makes such an accusation that the ship can navigate, can flow without a captain, without a sailor, then that person is mad. So Imam Hanifa rahmatullah replied that pity on your intelligence. Meaning that when you agree, when you say that a big, massive ship, compared to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a small ship or a small boat cannot navigate by itself, cannot move around by itself without a captain, without a sailor, then how can this world navigate by itself? How can the sun set at its exact time? How can the sun rise at the exact time? How come that the earth orbits around the sun and the moon orbits around the earth and so on, and all the planets and all the rain and so on? How can that happen without a sailor, without a captain, i.e. without a khaliq, without an operator, without a creator, i.e. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Obviously, when we look at the relevant verses, I'll go more into detail, but I just a small story which I'd like to share with you in this particular situation. So that is one belief which we should have regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one and everything came into his creation through his power and through his doing. The second belief which we should have regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that there is no partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. There is no partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no one similar or equal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he explains this particular belief or aqidah from the verse in the Holy Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةٌ إِلَّا اللَّهُ لَفَسَدَتَا. That if there were many gods, فِيهِمَا, i.e. in the heavens and in this world, لَفَسَدَتَا, then both of them will be destroyed. Now, think of an example like a country which has two kings. Now you could imagine that country will be in ruin. Or a country which has two presidents or two prime ministers, then that country will be in ruin. Because the people, who would they listen to? Should they listen to this president? Should they listen to that president? Or should they listen to that king? Or should they listen to that king? And those countries, you'll see, will be affected by civil war and so on, because there are too many factions and there are too many leaders and so on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that exactly the same way, that if we assume that this world had many gods, that there was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there were other gods, then this world wouldn't have remained the same. This world would have been destroyed long ago. But because this world is not destroyed, it is as it is, that shows that there is only one God and there is one ilah, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very quickly, the other beliefs which we should have. The third belief is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from any deficiencies, he is free from any faults. The fourth belief, the fourth aqidah which we should have regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He is free from any limb, that He is free from any body part. The fifth belief, the fifth aqidah regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He is omnipresent, that He is everywhere. And the sixth belief regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge of everything. And regarding the last three or four which I mentioned, a lot of rulings established regarding, which one of the aqidas I mentioned was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from limb. So how come Allah, there's many places in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Biyadillah, or Fatamma wajhullah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's face and so on. Obviously this will be discussed next week, inshallah. And similarly, the issue regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being omnipresent. So whether anyone besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, can he be omnipresent and so on. And similarly, one of the beliefs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He's alimul ghayb, that He has knowledge of everything. So the question is that can anyone besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be alimul ghayb and have knowledge of the unseen? Inshallah, these issues will be discussed next week. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to act upon what's been said. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. So God, if you have any questions then. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma atina fid dunya hasanatan wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina adhaban nar. Allahumma faghfir lana dhunubana wa kaffir anna sayyi'atina wa tawaffana min al-abrar. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا وعملا